Hey, Janine, welcome to the School for Humanity.
Hi, Andrew. I'm happy to be here.
Janine, before we dive into Biomimicry 3.8 and all the amazing work that your organization is up to, I'd love to even take a step back and talk about you as a kid. What did you aspire to be growing up?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I um, wanted to be a writer, and so I always had my nose in books, but I was usually up in a tree reading those books. And I wrote a lot, and I was always outside for 12 hours a day. Sort of had to. My mom rang the dinner bell to bring me in out of the woods and the fields. So um, I realized growing up that I had one of those flashpoint moments that a lot of people in environmental kinds of fields have. Unfortunately, it surrounds loss. I had this field that I used to hang out in and do all of my nature stuff, and I used to do my field guides up there and look for mushrooms, and I knew where all the butterflies were, cocooning and where the rabbits were living. And, it was like wind in the willows to me. Like I really knew that place. And one day when I was 12, I went there and there were all these stakes in the ground with yellow flags on them. And I found all these boot prints and I was kind of like, what is going on here? And what I didn't realize it was, if I had gotten up above and looked down, it would have been the layout for for the space to the subdivision. And so I watched it get, bulldozed away. I watched that community, that Wind in the Willows community, for a whole summer. And that definitely made me realize that what I wanted to write about was life and how life works and how amazing it is. Because I believed that if those guys with the bulldozers knew what I knew and understood the wonder of it and the awe of it, that they would do it differently.
Was there anything that sparked the aha moment for the actual creation of the company?
Yeah. So, gosh, it's actually started in 1990. I'm a natural history writer. And so I had written 5 books about plant and animal adaptations, how organisms can, live at the bottom of the sea and fly great distances and how they're beautifully adapted to their habitats with natural technologies, amazing chemistries and physiologies and physical adaptations. And the aha was, wow, we've got a lot of problems in sustainability, and yet a sustainable world already exists. Is anybody trying to emulate this? And so I began to gather, in 1990, I began to gather some very early beginnings of a field that had no name. And by 1997, when the book came out, I had gathered enough case studies of people. Biomimicry is innovation inspired by nature. So it was people studying leaves to come up with better solar cells, or studying spider silk to figure out how to do fiber manufacturing in non-toxic ways, And I just kept collecting these examples, and then I realized, wow, this field has no name. So I gave the folder that I was collecting all the examples in the name of biomimicry, and then it became a file cabinet of examples. And I said, "Whoa, this is a field without a name." So that's how it started. That was the aha. Was just, shouldn't we be consulting nature before we design anything? Shouldn't we say to ourselves, "Okay, I've got this problem to solve, this functional challenge to solve. I need to take salt out of water. I want to desalinate. Maybe I should go find out how mangroves live on fresh water with their roots in salt water. How are they desalinating? Maybe I should say, what in the natural world has already solved the problem I'm trying to solve? And then try to emulate that. That's what biomimicry is. And now it's a design methodology.
Can you talk about what Biomimicry 3.8, your company, is?
Yeah, we are a consultancy. We started the year after the book came out, because companies started to call. People had read the book and they said, this is very interesting, the research that you're talking about. Um, but we'd actually like you to bring your biologists to our design table because we're inventing every day. And if we need a new way to repel water on our fabrics and we don't want to use Teflon, how does nature repel water? Could you tell us? And I said, wow, that's a great idea. So my business partner, Dana Baumeister, and I started a company in which we trained biologists, and we do it to this day, to be biologists at the design table, to help people make better products, better processes, manufacturing processes, even better policies, decisions. We work in the product design space. We also work in the built environment space. So we work with architects, city planners. And our question is always, how would nature do this here? And what we do is we give our clients, we do a survey in the natural world of, say, that question about water repellency. And we look amoeba through zebra, we call it. We look, how do bacteria repel water? How do plants do it? How do mammals do it? We come up with all the mechanisms. They're never Teflon, by the way. And then we put them in a catalog for our clients. And we say, here's the design principles that we're finding in the natural world. Why don't you try this? And we've been doing that for almost 20 years, working with some of the major brands in the world.
How would you describe the mission of your company?
Our company hopes for a world mentored by nature's genius, because we believe that that will result in a more sustainable world in which human beings get to fit in again on this planet.
Can you describe the 3 ways of how you use your knowledge to connect the world with biomimicry and its innovation, education, and inspiration, correct?
Yeah. I talked about the innovation part of it, and, we might be asked, let me give you some examples of biomimicry because that really helps people focus in on it. Say you're talking to somebody about a wind farm. There's a great example of wind power that was inspired by how fish school, right? How they when they're in a school and they're the first ones in the beginning are swimming, they're moving sinuously and they're throwing off vortices, little spirals in the water, and the ones behind them curl their bodies and they catch those vortices and they get flung upstream. So and this is not an idea we came up with. We hooked people up also with other biomimics. There's a group at Stanford that came up with this way of using vertical axis wind turbines and putting them very close together instead of far apart so that they take advantage of each other's spirals, vortices, and they produce 10 times the wind power. So that's an example of how, School of Fish inspires a better wind farm. It's unusual pairings. So that in the innovation space, we're constantly asked by our clients to solve energy, to reduce energy in their processes, to reduce material use, and to reduce toxins. That's what we're trying to do. And so we bring nature's wisdom to their design table. We work with inventors. And in the education space, we train, because this is a new field. It's about 20 years old. We train people in biomimicry. We teach we have a center for biomimicry at ASU, as Arizona State University, and we have a master's course. We have a master's of science course to be a certified biomimicry professional. That's not just biologists, but also engineers who want to specialize in biomimicry, or architects or designers of all stripes, business people. We've got an 8-month course. So that's the training part. And we also train people in week-long workshops, and we train innovation shops to think in this way, to access the natural world. And then in the inspiration side, we're constantly turning people on to this idea. We do a lot of public speaking. To this idea that life's been around for 3.8 billion years. That's why our company's called Biomimicry 3.8. And in that time, life has learned to do everything we want to do. in a really graceful and elegant way, in a way that creates conditions conducive to life. So what we're trying to do is just inspire people to say, look, a sustainable world already exists. And it's time to, start to see nature as mentor, as a teacher rather than just a warehouse of goods and services. Yeah.
So why do you think innovators are turning to nature for inspiration on how to solve big issues facing the world? And where were they looking to previously for this type of innovation?
Yeah, it's a good question. When designers, and I use that term very, designers, engineers, anyone who creates, the people who create our world, chemists, when they go to start a design process, they've got a challenge that they need to solve. And what they usually do is that they look into the human patent database. They look at how other people have done it. A lot of designers will just, go through magazines, trying to get inspiration. And usually it's looking at how humans have solved it in the past. And what we're saying is that there's this enormous database of ideas. It's nature's patent database, if you will, that has not yet been accessed. And as we access it, what we start to realize is that, number one, they're usually novel ideas to us. In fact, there's studies that show that, if you look into the human patent database and then you try to solve the same problem and you look at how organisms have solved them, a guy named Julian Vincent did a study, and he assumed that we would have solved things in the same way and we'd find the same solutions in the natural world. Solutions to reducing friction or drag, how to do certain chemical reactions, that we would have happened on the same things. And it turns out there's only about a 12% overlap. And what that means is 88% of the time you're surprised. So novelty is one of the first things why people are turning to nature. And then the second thing is that everybody needs now, whether they publicize it or not, they need more sustainable solutions. Customers require it. Policies require it. And their shareholders require it. So sustainability, because organisms have had to live in or near their manufacturing facilities, right? In or near, right? They have to live in their habitats. Mm-hmm. That system has figured out how to, just by living and doing what they do, these organisms actually enhance their places, right? For their offspring. So that's what we're trying to figure out how to do. And when you take a biomimetic approach, you very often will wind up with sustainability and novelty.
In terms of your innovation projects, which is when you're consulting in some instances with organizations, is there the most out of the box example of a project you've worked on? You stated a really amazing example with the wind farms earlier in the conversation. I'd love to hear if there's any others that really stand out to you.
Oh gosh, there's so many. One of the places to look really for case studies is one of our sites called asknature.org. There's so many great biomimicry examples. But in terms of what we've worked on, it's a really interesting one that we worked on with a carpet company, Interface Carpets, very, very sustainable, well-known in the sustainability space. They make carpet tiles. They're the largest commercial carpet tile manufacturer. So those squares you see, in airports and schools and hospitals, they used a lot of glue in their processes. When they looked at their sustainability, sort of where they were doing the most harm, one of the things was glue, because they glue down the carpet tiles, right? And the glue isn't really great. It's not that good for human health. But also, the whole thing about carpet tiles and the whole thing that Interface was trying to do is say, you know what, we'll take back our carpet tiles and we'll recycle them. So if you stain or wear out a carpet tile, pick it up, send it back to us, and we'll send you another one. And that wasn't possible because they were gluing them down. So we had a workshop and basically said, how does nature adhere without glue? And there's lots of ways that nature does that. And what we realized that one of the things that nature really uses is the effect of gravity, the effect of weight, that pressing into a surface. And so what we wound up doing is finding a way to attach all the carpet tiles to each other so that it essentially became a broadloom carpet and gravity held it down. And they just don't use glue anymore. And it's hard to explain how these workshops work, but it came out of like looking at how bird feathers, hook together with barbs and barbules and how things, how nature sort of zippers things together and holds things together. And also just looking at things like, how geckos stick and how flies stick and releasable adhesion kind of thing. And interestingly enough, just by now what they do is they've got these little, I don't know, they're kind of like Post-it notes, circular, clear Post-it note kind of things that they tuck in the corners underneath each of the carpet tiles to attach the four together and to lightly attach it to the floor. What that means is a huge amount of loss, no waste, right? You can roll the carpet up now because it's all attached to itself. You can roll it up and take it to your next office, right? You really can do this recycling and renewal. I mean, those sorts. I tell that example because it's so simple. We've had other examples where it's a complicated chemistry we're trying to do or whatever, but this was a breakthrough that really it completely changed their product line. They were able to then start to do residential carpets. And because they could now, you can imagine a carpet squares as a dining room table now under your dining room table in your apartment because you're not gluing to the floor. All kinds of things happened as a result. But the biggest thing was that the environmental effect went down by 95%. So it's always incredibly fun. It's an incredibly fun job. We work on, creating new ways of doing fire retardancy. We're working on replacing polyurethane foam, which is actually a pretty toxic situation. Polyurethane foam that is in cushions. So to replace that completely, to say how does nature cushion, right? How does nature spring back, and can we make something that's completely non-toxic, biodegradable? And replace every bit of foam. Think of all the cushions that you sit on, from your car to your airplane seat, all of it, to your couch. Those are things we do. The other thing we do is we work on very large things. Here you're talking about a carpet, cars, planes. We've worked on all kinds of redesigning the barge rudders to reduce energy use, but all the way up to cities. So in our built world practice, we work with city planners, and what we believe is that a biomimetic city or community, or even a building, should perform like the wild land that would be there if the city wasn't there. That's truly biomimetic. And what I mean by perform is when you look at an ecosystem like a forest, it's doing all kinds of things, free benefits for us. It's building soil, and it's cleaning water, and it's cleaning air, and it's supporting biodiversity, it's sequestering carbon. And those are called ecosystem services. And what we say is that a building and its landscaping, an entire city, should also, at the end of the day, function at the same level as the wildland next door. So these are called ecological performance standards. So we help people design in ways that actually, instead of doing less harm, we actually try to make the water cleaner when it leaves the site, or buildings, for instance, with HVAC systems, which heating and cooling systems that actually clean the air that comes into them and releases cleaner air. Concrete that sequesters carbon dioxide in its manufacture and pulls down carbon dioxide. Green roofs that cool the to be stored as it would in a natural setting. So that's sort of a kind of a wild idea to most people. But that's what happens when you get an ecologist dreaming of what a city could be.
I'd love to shift the conversation around how business can be used as a force for good. And your organization is a B Corp. Can you describe what is a B Corp and why did you decide to become one?
Yeah, a B Corp, it stands for Benefit Corporation. And it's a designation like a C Corp, or, it's a legal definition that you actually apply to become a B Corp. And there's all kinds of things that you have to do, which is, your practices have to be sustainable. And this is everything from, are you planting trees when you travel on an airplane? Are you reducing the amount of travel you need to do? Do you have sustainable, are you walking the talk in your office? And also it's about, how we do very, very, very good benefit package for our employees. We have, really generous professional development, really generous, family leave policies, things like that. So it's benefiting society, benefiting the environment. And it's kind of a higher standard that you hold yourself to. It's completely voluntary to do it. But it's one of those things that actually, every year you've got to sort of prove yourself up again and say, am I behaving like a benefit corporation? So we did it because we already were doing we try to live by life's principles. Life's principles is one of these things we use. It's kind of a nature's eco checklist that we use with clients. And we said, we better be following life's principles, right? And creating conditions conducive to life right here in our company. It's not easy to do, actually. I mean, you really, it's not a slam dunk. It's actually, I would really recommend it for anybody just trying to be on that cutting edge. And, plus it's a community, we were one of the first ones, in the US, and now it's a rather large community. And so you also have community, you meet with other B Corp members, and we try to do business with each other too.
Do you have any hiring practices or hiring best practices to make sure that anyone who's joining your organization truly believes in your mission and is a good culture fit?
That's interesting. We do. We have a really interesting application process. We take it really very, very seriously. And because we're looking for authenticity, in people, in terms of we want mission-oriented people that are authentically here to. We're a not just for profit company, right? We've got a larger mission, and we also have a nonprofit, so we're also hiring for that. But we do a lot of sort of visioning exercises, I guess you would call it, with people. We ask them to imagine themselves 5 years from now. Mm-hmm. What does that, and they're writing a letter about their work, and what are they doing every day, and how do they feel about it? And they do these, it's kind of interesting. It's almost like we do some workshopping with them. We give them, actually, if we're hiring biologists, we give them some of the problems we've already had. We have them go through to see how creative and how deep their biology knowledge is. We also are a scientifically rigorous organization, so that means a lot to us. But we're also looking, the major I guess the major characteristic of biomimicry as a field is humility. It's, by its very nature, what you're saying is the best ideas may have already been invented, and they're in the natural world. So there's a respect for the natural world, and there's a humility. And it's interesting because people, our clients feed that back to us. They say, your folks are really fun to be with. They're so enthusiastic and passionate about the natural world. They're super professional, but they're so humble, right? And I guess we're looking for that. It's just because what that does is it opens up your mind to the idea that, an octopus might be teaching you something today, right?
So you've mentioned this a few times, but I'd love to get it in your own words right here around how do you measure success in your life? Because obviously you care about more than just the bottom line at your organization.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we really, really hope is that that any designer or decision maker anywhere in the world, at the moment of creation, asks the question, what would nature do here? And has a way to find out the answer to that question. And so when I talk about success, I have to talk about the fact that, the for-profit consultancy is part of both training people how to do this and making this sort of de rigueur in a very important space, which is where our inventions come from. But then the nonprofit is also part of our success in the sense that we understand that you've got to train people early on, from K through 12. And you've got, on the nonprofit side, we wanted to make nature's solutions available free in the public domain. So while at the same time we're doing for-profit consultancy, on the nonprofit side, we're putting as quickly as we can in place digital tools, design challenges for students, ways and curricula so that people can do that for free, right? So success to us means that people practice biomimicry. They look at their decision-making through the lens of nature, right? So success, very simply means more people are practicing and proficient in biomimicry beyond us. And that's why we have a training component, for instance. And ultimate success is, that this way of inventing doesn't even need to have a name. It just becomes, it's not a specialty design, biomimicry design. It's good design. That's really, that's when it becomes naturalized in the culture. Right?
So for anyone who's listening to this, what's the one thing you hope they take away from your story?
Well, that if you come out of love and passion, that really the world will see that, and doors will open, and the right people will spiral into your orbit. And keep on, that passion is essential in a world where it's so easy to give into despair, to give into cynicism. You've got to keep that sort of childlike, unshakable belief. That's what we've got. We have an unshakable belief that one day biomimicry will be a part of everybody's design kit, right? That's our unshakable belief. And it's very difficult to, and it's very difficult to do what we've done for 20 years without a complete passion that we're on the right path and we're doing the right thing. So I would say, the biggest takeaway is keep on searching until you find something that you have no doubts about.
So if we were to look 20 years into the future and everything that you're working on comes to fruition, what does our world look like?
It is functionally. It may look different. A city may look different, but it's functionally indistinguishable from the wildland next door. Literally, like the vision I have is I live in western Montana and I fly to get home. I fly into Missoula. And you fly over just hundreds of miles of wilderness. And you look down and from the plane and you just go, wow, that's, I know what it's like down there. It's beautiful. It's fragrant air. It's bird song and clear streams and, healthy forests. And then you get into the city. And all of a sudden, you're like, well, there's that smoke plume, and, all of a sudden, all of that beautiful functionality, all that beautiful, the way it performs, kind of goes away. And someday, I hope that you'll fly in, you'll look down at the city, and it will be functioning. Very much like the wilderness that you just flew over. That there won't be this separation. And that we'll feel finally at home, right, on the planet, that we'll have figured out a way to fit in.
So my last question is, building an organization, you've been doing this for 20 years. There's a lot of highs and there's a lot of lows.
Oh God.
And
yeah.
I'd love to hear from you, what keeps you going even through some of those low moments, which can be pretty low, which isn't always talked about in entrepreneurship.
Oh yeah, totally. We got through 1998, the recession, and we kept our people. I'm really proud of the fact that we kept the doors open and we kept our people employed. And when we didn't have any client work, we just kept going. And there's been, it's not easy raising money right now. The fundraising in the nonprofit world is really tough. And consulting is difficult, especially if you walk in and nobody's ever heard of the kind of consulting you do, right? So you've got all of these challenges around, excuse me, you're doing what? So when you're creating a whole new category, it's really difficult, right? You've got to, but what really keeps us going is the understanding that we're at a historical point with this with this way of seeing the world. And our success very much will affect whether biomimicry becomes a sort of a flavor of the day, that, we tried that back in the 2000s. And we used to go look at nature, but we really don't do that anymore. We are at a proving point right now for this discipline. It's an emerging discipline. And we very much feel that weight of a historic responsibility to not only to succeed, but to succeed with great integrity. So that's, I don't know, there's a big sense of responsibility. It keeps us going. With that also is a great excitement to be at the beginning of something new. It's very beautifully seductive to every day go, I wonder who's going to contact us today and what realm of human endeavor is going to be asking for nature's models and patterns and designs and recipes. And it's our honor to be the ones representing the rest of the natural world and doing everything we can to be that translator for all the biological and ecological knowledge that humanity has, trying to pass that on. That's our, it's our honor. And it's also just a heck of a lot of fun because we're nature nerds. What do we do all day? We read about the natural world and then we talk about it. I mean, it's huge. It's huge fun. So that's what gets us through the inevitable hard times of having, because we're working with Fortune 50 companies, right? So we're working with the GEs and the Boeings and, Jaguar Land Rover and, Nike, and as well as the seventh generation and the cool groovy Patagonias and things like that. We work with giant companies, P&G, and it takes months to get your contract signed, to do your work. And there's this urgency we feel that, we've really got to turn around, create more sustainable products and processes, and create new methodologies that keep on coming up with new, right, a durable way to find solutions. We feel a sense of urgency, and yet, the thing that really feels glacial sometimes is the contracting process, right? And yet we've got a tremendous managing director right now, Nicole Miller, who her passion is business and sustainability. She loves business, so she's really great at helping us figure out, how to navigate those corporate hallways and keep on bringing nature into those places where it so desperately is needed. So we're figuring it out, and it's, I wouldn't have ever expected when I was that little kid that I would be doing this now. I had no idea. And that's the other thing. I think, people listening to this, sometimes, the fates, the universe, whatever you want to call it, kind of taps you on the shoulder and says, you're needed. And you're like, no, that's not me. I have no expertise in this. I am not a business person. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of pushback that you say, like, no, I'm a biologist. What? I'm a writer. I'm a natural history, please. And the universe keeps on tapping and says, no, actually, right now, it's time to be engaged. We're in really huge pivot times right now. And so answer that. Don't, the last thing, when I talk to people in school and university, they're just so brilliant, looking at their faces. And I just say, I plead with them, don't make widgets, don't do trivial work. Don't make pet rocks, go solve real world problems that are gonna, meet the global goals that you guys are so involved in, right? That are gonna look at those global goals, look at those UN goals, and pick one, pick 5, pick 10, work to solve something real.
I love it. And lastly, if someone is really inspired by this interview and they want to learn more about biomimicry or about your organization, can you share some awesome resources for everyone?
Yeah, you bet. So the nonprofits, you can start there if you just want to really sort of absorb what's going on. We've got resources on there. It's biomimicry.org, and it's the Biomimicry Institute.
Can you spell that out?
Yeah, biomimicry, bio, and then mimicry, MIMICRY.org. That's our institute. And from there you can also go to asknature.org, which is just a blast. It's about 2000. You can type in a function like, how does nature communicate? And up will come all these cool examples. That's a great place to start. If you are a business and you want to, access our consulting, or if you want to take one of our week-long workshops, like we're about to do one in December in Costa Rica, that is a week. Just, it's amazing. And I'm going to teach that with Dana. We don't often teach together anymore because we've got so much going on. So it's going to be fun. That's in December. So that site is the for-profit site. That's called biomimicry.net. So biomimicry.net, biomimicry.org, and asknature.org. Start there. That's sort of the beating heart of the biomimicry network. We've got 40 networks around the world regionally. So that's another thing you can do. You can go on our site and see if there's a network near you and go, do bio drinks with people and they do monthly stuff. There's all kinds of stuff going on in biomimicry in the world. You'll see if you you type it in, if you're hearing it for the first time, you type it in, you're like, wow, look what's going on. Yeah. So.
Perfect. Well, Janine, thank you so much for your time today. It's much appreciated.
Oh, Andrew, thanks for what you're doing. Good luck with the School of Humanity.
Thank you.
All right.